Hi everyone, welcome to week 2. This week we'll be thinking about researching the lived experience, and we'll be considering practices of inquiry. What does paying attention do, and what does it set in motion? And also we'll be thinking about what the arts do to the act of noticing. What changes when noticing becomes artful? So this week you'll be reading Van Manen chapter 1, the entire chapter. You'll be reading the Acts of Noticing essay in the Material Encounters exhibit catalog by Sylvia Kind, and you'll be reading Living Inquiry by Karen Meyer. This week you'll be watching this week 2 video lecture, and you'll also be watching a short film called The Art of Breakfast. And then your assignment this week is to complete Portfolio 1, which is worth 10% of your grade. To post this on the eLearn forums by Sunday at 11:55 p.m. and then be sure to respond to others' portfolio entries. So this week we'll be considering what it means to engage in a living inquiry and the orientations and dispositions that it requires. So more specifically, I hope to spend a good amount of time thinking about what it means to notice, to pay attention, and what it might mean to do this artfully, thinking about the arts of noticing and what this does to pedagogy. So in Carly Rinaldi's article called Teacher as a Researcher, she writes that when we say that school is not a preparation for life, but is a life, this means assuming the responsibility to create a context in which words such as creativity, change, innovation, error, doubt, and uncertainty, when used on a daily basis, can be truly developed and can become real. And this quote helps me to think about the possibilities of what living inquiry does to curriculum. That curriculum is made of inquiries that emerge when educators take seriously children's ideas, their theories and questions, and when educators study alongside children with genuine curiosity and a search for understanding. So in this sense, inquiry is not something done for children or only by children. Inquiry is a process of research that matters deeply to educators because they're invested and motivated by the questions being asked. The educator, in this sense, is a researcher and is in study with and alongside children. So living inquiry is a form of research that requires particular dispositions and ways of being, a way of orienting to the details of the world with others. Living inquiry attunes to the haptic, the sensational and bodied ways of noticing something. It operates beyond tools of measurement that are often used within a scientific paradigm that we discussed in our first week together. Rather, it requires particular dispositions and orientations, a noticing, listening, and attending to the rhythms of seemingly small, ordinary moments with children and others, into their aesthetic and social qualities. And this is where pedagogy and research become intimately entwined. A rich pedagogy requires an orientation to our work with children as an act of research, where the educator is searching and researching for meaning or detail inside some component of the place in which we live alongside children. So research requires a consistent and sustained attitude of questioning, of curiosity, and wondering, to continue intensifying the problems or queries that pedagogy is faced with. So living inquiries attend to the everyday, to the lived experience. It's about being implicated in the questions that we ask. It's a participatory approach, and it's interpretive, not objective, in the way of seeing. So living inquiry is enacted in the everyday moments of life, where teachers and researchers are not separate from, but intimately entangled and accountable to the questions we ask and the effects these questions create. So this poses ethical concerns to our roles as educators. It's a fundamentally relational stance with others, with children, with place, and with materials. So in this way, the questions that we ask and the inquiries we think through matter deeply to us, and we have accountabilities to them because we are involved. So, in our readings this week, Karen Meyer writes that living inquiry is a practice of being in the world. It concerns care of oneself in the world. Living inquiry encompasses how we experience our worldliness in everyday living and what awareness as a clearing brings before prejudiced eyes, those ready-made interpretations that otherwise happen behind our backs. As well, it seeks awareness that sees newness, truth, and beauty in daily life. So in this sense, our modes and methods of inquiry really matter. And as John Law writes, methods produce realities. The methodological lens that we use to interpret the world enables what it is that we're able to see and how we see it. So methods don't just transfer information from the world for us to consume as if there's some truth out there for us to find and digest, but rather methods create the truths that we see. Methods are subjective and they generate meaning, and thus in this course, we'll see methods such as writing, photography, videography as method, as research, as already of the world and of us, as processes that render something into being because of how it is that it's being rendered. So in this course, how matters deeply. And then Karen Meyer goes on to say in this article, how you spend your day is how you spend your life. It matters. So then living inquiries are intended to explore the structure, content, and movement of daily life as it matters. Van Manen helps us to gain a sense of what it means to require an ability to be reflective, insightful, sensitive to language, and constantly open to experience. And these are the orientations and dispositions that are necessary if we are to engage in a living inquiry with children. So living inquiry is an entanglement of knowing, being, and doing, where what you know and what you do is inextricably linked to the research. You only gather an understanding of something because you are living it. This is a significant shift from the scientific paradigm where research maintains legitimacy and validity by means of objectivity, or of keeping yourself outside of the phenomenon, as if a researcher can exist separately and her understanding of the experience is untainted by her presence and her own histories. So in your work this term, I encourage you to consider how your vision is dependent upon your own received vocabularies that determine what and how you're able to see. And as I shared last week, our orientations to research and ways of seeing do not come out of nowhere. They're actively informed by ongoing historical trajectories and presences that influence how we are able to be and become in the world. So these positionalities are non-neutral. The notion of objectivity seems to create an illusion that we can produce and reproduce knowledge that exists in isolation from these past-present histories, as if knowledge is socially, culturally, and geographically neutral. And as I spoke to last week, I appreciate how Donna Haraway's work in matters of objectivity and ways of seeing from a feminist perspective can help us in this course. She insists on the embodied nature of all vision. And in this sense, feminist research processes seek to reclaim the sensory system that has been used to signify a leap out of the marked body and into a conquering gaze from nowhere. Here, Haraway is challenging the rationalities of research practices that use objectivity as a means to make large, generalized claims over distinct, multiplest phenomena, where researchers are able to make grand claims without accountability to their positionalities within the research and without distinction of the lived contexts in which meaning is gathered. So she argues rather for situatedness in research and in pedagogy, where understanding and descriptions of phenomenon are internally part and partial. And this calls on us to become answerable for what we see, how we learn to see it, and how it is that we share that experience and that understanding with others. So within this course and the assignments, you'll need to navigate the balance between situating yourself as implicated, yet not falling too far into self-indulgence and mere reflection in your writing style. So this form of writing of the lived experience is not solely autobiographical. It's not necessarily only about you, but you're inevitably present and entangled as you interpret the phenomenon. So you'll be trying to write from the between space in the middle of things that you're attuning to, rather, and yourself and others who are experiencing it. So in this sense, your writing is not only about how you feel, but more so it's situated within the experience from a relational perspective. So it's situated in the meeting points, junctures, interactions of components that make up an experience between materials, place, and humans. So in Karen Meyer's article this week, she writes that, quote, living inquiry is such resoluteness away from the tranquilizing pull of the they world, or the assumed familiarities that govern us but go unnoticed, toward a practice of awareness and of inquiry into the situated contexts in which we move every day, end quote. And this does not have to be necessarily about big or grand moments, but rather it can be very powerful to attend to the ordinary, the mundane, and the everyday. So Myers goes on to quote Guignon when he writes that what is needed then is a way of recovering a sense of the openness of the possible of our own responsibility as individuals in articulating and bringing to realization the worldly contexts in which we find ourselves. And that means being able to experience our predicament not as a mere set of circumstances subsumable under universally valid and hence anonymous principles, but as a situation where the choice demanded of us is defined by the concrete characteristics of the context itself. And this quote provokes us to reconsider the world beyond circumstantial, as if the ways in which the world takes shape are neutral and without structures of meaning, history, and intention, where in the name of objectivity, claims can be made without situated contextual livelihoods, vibrancies, and detail. So living inquiry requires an interrelationship between the text, the topic, and the writer. It's accountable for the processes of coming to know something, not just the knowledge itself, but it's deeply situated in the process of coming to know, of coming to understand, and in the sense, the how. It acknowledges that there are many kinds of knowledges and many ways of knowing, so that your interpretation of an event is only one of many. It's process-oriented. So living inquiry is a relationship between the text theories you're engaging with, the topic of focus, and yourself as a writer, as an inquirer. In your inquiry assignment, you'll need to balance phenomenological theory, your topic, and your own writing processes toward an enlivened and poetic narrative of an experience that reflects these three components and how it is that they work together. So you'll be practicing this throughout the term in each of your portfolio entries. So this is very much about process. In your portfolio entries and in the inquiry assignment, you will not present the phenomenon as a thing. For example, this is a picture of my sister who is courageous because she does this and this, but rather you'll need to narrate a poetic description of how you have come to understand courage, in this example, as a transformative process that is living, nuanced, and perhaps tensioned, that it alludes to an openness and aspects of unknowability. So in this way, an inquiry may be beautiful because of its complexity and perhaps its contradictions and tensions, not because it represents a common image of what courage should be or how you imagine it ought to be. So if you're able to show the movements and processes of courage, this will offer a much more interesting narrative with felt value over something that is static and wholly knowable. And so in this sense, be careful of describing phenomena in ways which fall into a cliche or something that we already know is common about it. And this is where phenomenology as an orientation to research and pedagogy helps us to think in the specificity of things as they're lived. So on page 5, Van Manen writes, from a phenomenological point of view, to do research is always to question the way we experience the world, to want to know the world